Right now. All right. Namaste, good evening, and a very warm welcome from all of us here at IICA. Thanks for joining on another edition of Master Strokes by IICA. My name is Arjun Datta. I'm your host for the evening. Now, a lot can be said about what makes a good, successful kitchen, whether it's at home or whether it's in the restaurant. According to us, it's always the ingredient. The chefs work with the best ingredients. And our guest today has been pivotal in transforming the way chefs have been connecting with producers and ingredients from all over the United States. And now he's even been transformational in bringing those ingredients worldwide. So, joining me live from the United States, please welcome Chef Andy Chapman. Chef, thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great. It's good to see you, sir. It's been quite a while since our September visit, and a lot has changed in the world, I believe.
Well, yes, it has, and 10 months and counting. It's been a long journey for us, a long wait before we actually have had a chance to talk to you. But I'm really delighted and thankful that you took the time out to speak with us. Your visit in September was such an enriching one. We learned so much from you.
Well, it was so much fun for me, and to continue to stay connected to you guys and so many chefs and so many of your students have stayed connected with us, and I hear from them every week. I hear from different ones asking me questions or commenting on Instagram and share. I see their stories about what they're cooking and where they're going next, and that's so fun to have the technology to stay connected. We didn't have that 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
That's right. That's right. And thank God for technology. We're now talking live to an entire audience of people who, amongst which, of course, are our students and friends and family from all over. So it's obviously been really interesting, and I wanted to actually start this conversation by talking about your journey, chef. A lot of us know and a lot of us don't know, but the fact is you've had quite the journey yourself. You've had quite the success, and Godspeed. I hope that you continue having that. So you started out with digital marketing, I understand, and I may be wrong in the order. So, but you started out with digital marketing, website development, did a lot of content and brand management, and then of course your call for food happened, and 10 years on, you've got a lovely brand that connects farmers with chefs and so many other things. My question
Yeah,
is, was that a part of your vision all along to reach where you've reached?
no, it really never crossed my mind. And here's the funny thing. So I grew up in a town in Mississippi, which is one of the most rural states in the US. And we grew up in a pretty rural area. In fact, if I think back to fine dining, hey, we didn't, I'm one of seven children. We didn't have the means to go eat fine dining once a week and order all the food and whatever. But even in our town, fine dining, as I know it now, having traveled the world and eaten at places like the Leela Palace in Delhi and shared meals with some of the best chefs in the world have had me at their table. We didn't have anything near like that. So the best food that I knew at that point was probably my grandparents cooking. And I have one grandparent who is from, they grew up in Michigan. So there's a very northern US culture. And the other one were very southern. They were in the Atlanta area. And so they both brought different things to the table, but that was probably the best food, that the happy memories of food. And so as I started a web development firm and was doing marketing, and we ended up working with restaurants. And I realized when we were working with restaurants and chefs that a lot of people were cooking things that, and the common French words for, beurre blanc and sous vide and all these things, those were not terms that I grew up knowing. And I found out that a lot of other people in this state and other places didn't really understand that either. And so as I started to tell those stories of, hey, this is what a sous vide pork chop means, it just resonated across people, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm not scared of that because I've had a pork chop, but I didn't know what sous vide was." And so it was really amazing to see the connection of people wanting to know more about their food, where it comes from, and so working with chefs just was. I mean, I always tell people I'm in the relationship business. Number one, I try to keep that at the forefront, and I've always loved making friends. And so as we started working with those different chefs, we made a lot of friends and got connected to different restaurants and different chefs. And it's kind of a fraternity. You meet a couple, you go to an event, you meet 10 more, you go to an event, you meet 10 more, then they kind of spread out. And so before you know it, you know people all over, just by kind of staying in that one little niche. So it's been a wild journey. It's not something we planned, but just really found in this just how much we loved. Always loved food, but knowing where it came from and having the next level of food, not just some national chain, but somebody who lovingly created a recipe based on what they remember from their childhood or their grandparents, or something that they took from a chef they studied under and put their own twist on. Was a whole new ball game for me.
Wow. No, I'm sure. I'm sure it must have been a very, very exciting journey. So today, I think your brand is doing a lot of work. Obviously your website is a great testament of everything that you're doing. I see a lot of content of outreach programs. I see a lot of content for educating and connecting chefs with producers. Tell me something, chef. What is the one thing that is probably in the center of this entire core value system? I mean, what is the one thing that binds everything together? Is it the love for food that draws you to every producer and chef out there?
I would say that the the connection to the ingredient, and no chef is any better than the ingredient they start with.
Yes.
If I tell you to make me a pizza crust with Lay's potato chips, which is a brand of just kind of the
Yeah.
general potato chips, I don't know if they have that.
No, they
Um,
do.
then that, there's only so much you can do with that. But if I give you some awesome wheat and let you grind it and take some yeast and give you the best of the best, you can make some incredible things with it. But you can't make incredible things with um,
Substance.
bland, boring ingredients. And so that connection and that need for a better ingredient is really kind of what propelled us to launch Eat Y'all, because chefs were asking, hey, where can I find this catfish, or where can I find a better rice, or where can I find, fill in the blanks. And so we became a conduit to help connect people to those better ingredients. And that really is the core of what we're doing, really becomes connecting people back to the farmers. And I grew up in a, like I said, a rural state. We had chickens and a cow or two and rabbits and sheep and goats, and
Oh,
we
those are the
milked the
days.
goats. And so it was a very, 20 acres, not that big for us. My wife's family grew up on a much
Modest.
larger farm. They had a huge garden. And so the connection to agriculture and ingredients has been one that we've always had, but a lot of people have never had a tomato that's been picked in late July that's just got so much acid and so much flavor, and they just have eaten, greenhouse tomatoes that don't have that same flavor. So helping people connect to the better ingredients also propels the flavor that the chef can do, and that's kind of where it all starts with the better ingredients.
I couldn't agree more. The chefs world over have always gone absolutely distances to find the perfect ingredient. Now, what I'm interested to find out is, are consumers, in your view, have consumers over the last 10 years also been driven to build awareness about where their ingredients come from? I mean, when they go to a restaurant, are they keen, or do you see a change in how consumers sort ingredients out when they eat out?
Yeah, there's been a dramatic shift in that, and I think as food has gotten better, people who want to, the Food Network in the U.S. has been huge, and people have seen all these chefs and they're making things, and they're like, how do I make that? How do I get this product? And so they're looking for better ingredients to cook with at home. But part of that also is that they're trying to find, they want to know how the animal was raised, was it taken care of well. There's a lot of thought into the process, and whether what's been sprayed on this, what all has happened to this ingredient before it got to my plate. And even now in this current post-COVID environment, right? People are concerned about how many different people have touched the squash or the apples or whatever. Like, where's it been? What all has happened to it? And I have friends who get groceries delivered and they take a Lysol wipe and wipe down every single thing and then rinse it off. And there's a lot of concern about where people's ingredients have come from. And I think that started probably around, about 10 years ago. People really started taking more time to research and learn and understand that. And now it's become, it's not even odd to have the name of the farm on the menu. And for chefs, that put the name of the farm where their beef, their chicken, their poultry, chicken and poultry are the same thing. That was a test. Poultry, even lettuces. There's a farm about 10 minutes from me that grows these incredible lettuces, and chefs will put that it is Salad Days lettuce on the menu because people know, oh, well, that's going to be fresh. It wasn't in a truck for 6,000 miles. I know the people I can go find the people who grew it and ask them any question I want to. And guess what? The chef can charge more for it. And it's because it's fresher and it didn't have to travel as far. They have less waste because it doesn't go bad as quickly. There's so many things that tie into that ecosystem. And so I think that is going to continue, and we'll see more and more of that as the repercussions of this COVID thing happen. People really want to know even more about where their food comes from and how they can get it safely.
That's very true. I think you're right. The way you actually connected it with the current situation we're in, I could not have thought of a more relevant example because um, I think people are very, very cautious. I mean, if I'm right in saying so, 10 years ago, the description of a dish on a menu would probably be limited to how it's cooked and what it is. Today, it's where it's from, how it's cooked, what it is.
Yeah.
That's probably a good nomenclature for description for any kind of standard high-end or entry-level or QSR menu.
You should have one of your students do a research project and go back and find menus from the 90s and 80s and look at the differences between there and now and see what percentages of them even mention that, because I'd be fascinated to know that.
Well, I knew this conversation is going to give me a lot of ideas, and you just give me a fantastic one. My students may or may not do it, but I'm definitely going to take that up. That's a very interesting idea. We have a collection in our library. We've been collecting about, I think, over 100 menus that we've collected over our travels for years at end. So a lot of restaurants probably don't know that we're collecting their menus, but we've been collecting them because it's been a passion and a very interesting timestamp of seeing how restaurants progress and what changes they bring in their menus.
And I think another metric in that is the price point, and whether the more farms they have listed, the higher the price point can be. Because I think that's something that I want your students to know, is that from the putting my consumer hat on, and one of the things we did for a long time was had a food blog where we wrote not from any culinary genius point of things where I knew everything, and I still don't know everything. I'm still learn from chefs everywhere I go, every time I get a chance to be in the kitchen and learn. But the knowledge of the more you know about where your food comes from, I think chefs are being able to they spend more on better ingredients, but then they can turn around and charge more, and customers like that. And I think there's obviously a balance. There's a tipping point of too much, but I think that you might find that there's a relationship between better ingredients sourced and named and the price that they have to turn around and sell it for, but also they're staying in business.
Absolutely. So though you've actually answered part of my next question also, but if you don't mind sharing, your views on, so the connection between farmers and high-end restaurants. I think of restaurants like the French Laundry and many others who have for years at end promoted that they almost as good as grow their own ingredients. So the connection between farms and restaurants has been paramount for years at end, particularly the ones at Michelin Guide or Michelin star level. Tell me something, Chef, in your view, is that a trend is that there to stay, or is it going to change? How do you see it changing in the next couple of years?
Oh, I think it's going to stay. I think it's going to grow. Here's another thing during the, I'll kind of kick back to this COVID moment we're in the town where I am right this minute, which is the middle of Mississippi. A lot of restaurants had to go curbside only, or close, and a lot of grocery stores then were serving. They were harder hit by consumers who weren't going out to eat because of either the restaurants were closed or they didn't feel comfortable going out to eat. And so a lot of restaurants that had relationships with farms, we're not out of food in our country, we're not out of food in your country, but there's some supply chain things that caused a lot of friction. Well, I had chefs who would take the ingredients that they would have made into full prepared meals and made meal kits and had, okay, look, because a to-go steak, I know y'all are not huge on steak over there, but a to-go steak is not that great, right? Probably a to-go pork chop, not that great. But if you provide me the pork chop and all the different things that you were going to put in to season it in a packet or in a little deli cup or something, then I can cook that same thing on my skillet and it's hot and fresh. And so there are a lot of farms that helped. I mean, they had product, but they weren't selling it in mass. So they said, hey, would you sell this raw product? And there were restaurants that were selling eggs and milk and cheese and all these things
Wow.
from the restaurant. And you can only do that to the extent that you have the relationships to be able to call the farm and say, hey, look, we still need your product. And this has really affected our farmers a tremendous amount. And it was almost like the ones that sold the most to the best restaurants were affected and are affected more than the ones that were sold through major broadliners and kind of more industrial farms are faring better than a lot of the boutique farms. But as people have reacted and pivoted and figured out, hey, look, I have customers who can get this food to a large number of people, even if they're not cooking it all the way, but even if they kind of give them a head start, hand it to them in a packet where they can, a meal kit. Those people that had those relationships with farms really have done well. And I've seen a lot of people move a lot of food in that manner. And I think with a great relationship with your farmer and knowing, hey, and the other thing is some farms said, hey, we have this much that's going to be ready to sell, because if you're growing a lamb or a pig, or you can't just hold them indefinitely. They have to go off the farm into a freezer and onto a plate. You can't just, they're not going to stop growing just because your market slowed down. Yeah. And so farms that were able to communicate with chefs and restaurants and purveyors and say, hey, this is what's coming up, they were able to still move those products and get a decent price for them because they had those relationships.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So we've talked about how things have changed over the last few months. I mean, some of the thoughts that you've shared are absolutely inspirational as well as moving. Now, in your view, what are the next 10 years like? I mean, particularly in the United States and in context to what you're doing, how do you see things changing over the next 8 or 10 years? Or is that too far-fetched to even predict right now?
Well, that is a really tricky question because we're still figuring out what's going to change in the next 6 months as people reopen. I saw a statistic that said, hundreds and thousands of restaurants may be really negatively affected. I think one of the things that's going to happen is there are people who did the culinary arts, and whether it's bartending or waiting tables or whatever as a job as opposed to a passion. And when things got tight and when it was really hard and everybody here is wearing a mask if you work in a restaurant. And I don't know if you've been wearing those around, but they're
I
uncomfortable.
have 6 masks. I have a mask for every day.
They're uncomfortable. They're hot. You can't, you can't see the server smile at you when they have one on. And
I didn't think of that. That's a very interesting point. The server could be really, really annoyed, and you wouldn't tell.
Yeah, and or you could, crack a joke or try to be funny, and they're laughing, and all you see is their eyes, and that's things that we're going to have to overcome as an industry and figure out how to communicate better, because I am concerned that it affects tips. And were they upset at me? Well, no, they were smiling. You just couldn't see their face. And so there are things short term like that I think we'll figure this out. But longer term, I think more and more people are going to be really interested in how they can connect with their purveyors of their ingredients directly. Even if they don't buy directly, they're going to want to know where it comes from and on a whole new level, and have fewer steps between the farm and the restaurant and the consumer. And I think we'll see that trend really happen. We've seen farms. I've talked to so many farms. We launched a new website called Find Family Farms a few weeks ago.
Many congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. So that was kind of to connect consumers who were looking for good food but weren't able or didn't feel like going out to eat, connect with the same farms that many of these chefs are selling to or buying from. And many of these farms have gone up 900%, 1,200% in sales online, like overnight. And so the consumers really are looking for where can I find certain things. And I feel like the market is going to reshift. And I feel like people who are really passionate about food are going to stay in. Some people are going to take a break and kind of recenter and try to figure out what the new is. I don't like saying the new normal, because I feel like none of this is normal. But I have a friend in New Orleans who basically posted yesterday that he's just been really frustrated and tired, and he's closing his restaurant. He was one of the first ones to reopen. And he said, I need to take some time off and figure out. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for innovation. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people who specialize in things to really do well in, you may not have to have a 300-seat restaurant to be super successful. You may need a really big kitchen and a great to-go system. And there are certain foods that hold perfectly for curbside, and there are certain foods that dry out or that don't do very well in that environment. And so as people figure out the best things to serve and sell that way, there will be a shift in that. If you put mayonnaise and whatever on your bread and then it sits for 10 minutes in the window and 25 minutes in the car, when somebody bites into it, the sandwich that they loved in your restaurant may have a completely different mouthfeel and all these other things because it's soggy. And so, a roast beef or shrimp po' boy or whatever we sell here, they may have lots of sauce. And one of the po' boys we call it a 12 napkin po' boy, because when you bite, it runs down your arms and it's really a huge mess because of the gravy. That po' boy, if it's to go, it only is going to be able to eat with a knife and a fork, because it's going to get even messier, right? So there are things like that.
Or you give 12 napkins with it.
Exactly. You just get your own bar towel. That's what you get. So there's a lot of things that I think are on the verge of changing, and we haven't even examined what the repercussions of all those things are. Hopefully we get back to normal really, really soon. I know you guys have been affected tremendously over there, and even the culinary school, we're doing things remotely, and we're doing the class next week remotely, and
Yes, yes,
um,
we are.
I think that's really neat how that works. But I love seeing my friends and giving them a hug
Yes.
and shaking hands and all of those things, and I want us to get back to that as soon as we can.
Yes, and we're looking forward to it. So, Chef, my last question, at least for now, is that you've obviously proven, and I said this in my introduction, that you've had a tremendous journey. You've proven that passion can take you anywhere. Literally, you've come all the way over from the United States to India, and I'm sure you've traveled much more than that. For our aspiring chefs, what is the one advice that you'd give them? Any one words of wisdom that you would give them in this current situation that we're in?
I would say there's a couple of things. One is know your craft and practice and practice and practice and practice, because doing excellent work is going to just catapult you to the top. One of my friends who's a great chef, I mentioned to him we were eating, and I can't remember what the dish was, but some of the onions were very irregularly chopped, and he
Was
sent
this
a
was
box
this
of.
here in India or was
So
this?
that was in the Mississippi,
Okay,
uh,
okay. Thank God for
over
that.
here. And one of the onions had a big chunk, and then there were different. Everything was different sizes, and I saw him take the guy aside and say, "Hey, look, I want you to take that box of onions and go home, and I want you to chop them all and practice tonight." And the guy knew what he was doing. He got in a hurry, or whatever it was, and he he said, "Yes, chef," and he brought back all the onions perfectly chopped the next day because he practiced, and he knew that every little thing makes a cumulative effect in the end result of the dish. And so getting better at his craft, not just saying, okay, I can cut an onion into small enough pieces for it to do what it needs to do in the dish, but the precision and things like that, I think that will separate students. And then investing in people is the number one. I've seen people who burn bridges and are really short, and who are always looking to advance themselves and their career over working well with others. And you're in a relationship business if you're a chef, and so getting along with people and building relationships. The guy who's your sous chef today may be your competitor across the street tomorrow, and vice versa. And so being great with relationships and caring about people, and I mean that's the way we're wired, is to know. I mean, without other people around us, it's kind of life is really a mess. And we've seen that in as we've been blocked off, and I stayed home for like 100 days straight, and I got to know the people in my house really well, probably in ways that I hadn't. And so the people aspect of things is so important in relationships. Your instructors you have, the people that you meet and communicate with, will be everything. I mean, that's our whole in life. That's a big currency is the relationships, and that the people that have encouraged me and supported me, and said, hey, you don't know anything about food, let me teach you, along the way have been incredible. And a lot of people have spent a lot of time showing me things, teaching me about different cuisines, teaching me about even how to hold the knife the first time. And I'll never forget that. And so that is something that everyone can do, regardless of your skill level, is really invest in relationships, and never stop learning. Never stop learning. The best chefs in the world are always reading cookbooks. They're always watching what their friends are doing. They're asking questions. They're not too proud to say, I haven't made a ton of pizzas. What are you doing with pizzas? How are you making this? Or, there's always a new sauce, a new technique, a new method that somebody else has perfected, and you should try to soak it all up.
That's true. That's entirely true. And I liked your point about, be nice to people and get to know them, and how about how a sous chef today might be a competitor tomorrow. Bill Gates once said that be nice to the nerd in your class. He might be your boss one day. And I think that's absolutely apt. That's absolutely apt. You never know who's gonna, be where someday. So I tell my students all the time that, number one, this industry is super small. It is probably the smallest, largest industry in the world.
Yeah.
You never know when you'll cross paths again. So that is in fact very wise advice. Well, with that, chef, and to my audience, I just want to say that we have a special surprise. For the first time, first edition of Master Strokes, we're going to flip the table, and now we're going to have Chef Andy ask a couple of questions to me. So I am a little nervous, so please forgive me. I've tried to ask my easy questions, so Chef, try and
I,
be easy on me as well.
I tried to get all the hardest ones lined up for you. So okay, we went to Delhi last September. We visited with you guys. I had so many meals that everyone said, this is the true, this is the only dal that you need to try. The rest of them are not made correctly. But when you think of Indian cuisine as the world sees it, um, and not necessarily inside India, but outside of India, as we look at Indian cuisine, what are we missing? Like, what Indian dishes? Obviously, there's the chicken tikka, and there's all these things that people think of when we think of Indian food in America. But what's not on the menu that we should be researching, discussing, trying, using?
All right, so I'm going to try and be as simple and modest about it as I can. In my view, Indian cuisine is too vast to be everywhere. There are heroes of our cuisine that have reached parts of the rest of the world, but if you ask me, there are so many other heroes that are still unsung. I would, if I could, bring a lot of regional cuisine out to the rest of the world. Yes, the northern Indian cuisine is popular, but so is the south, so is the east, so is the west, and so is the middle. So what we're actually missing is representation. But having said that, 10 years ago, my answer would have been probably more valid than it is today. I'm very proud of a lot of our chefs that are making tremendous effort in cities like New York, London, the major cities of the world, and even the ones that are upcoming. So a lot of our chefs are doing a tremendous amount of work. I can't stop thinking about an example such as Indian Accent or Junoon, two restaurants in New York who bring all parts of India into one plate. And so for us, they're doing a tremendous job. And that's a slow but a very steady process. So if you ask me, we're very proud of our food, just like any country should be. So every dal that we serve is the best version of what we have, but that's not the only one. So if that answers it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something else that as we think about that, one of our friends, I have two friends that have Indian restaurants, both of whom have just won national James Beard Awards in the last couple of years. And I think that's a neat thing about people who have taken Indian cuisine and flavors. And I was talking to Marianne about this, and I said the word assimilate. She said, no, that's not assimilated. It's incorporated, and it's using the ingredients that are available locally with some of the spices and things that are international, and kind of merge those two flavors and opportunities onto a plate. And I think that's it's amazing to see. You're talking about the ones in New York. There's so many of them that have
There's so
really.
many. I mean, there's a chef in California. I had the privilege of chatting with him a few weeks ago, Chef Srijit Gopinathan. He's in California, and he told me, he said, Arjun, I will make do with whatever is locally available. There's no point in bringing something from Tamil Nadu in India all the way over to California when I can find a very suitable substitute to it in California, homegrown. He said,
Yeah.
if I'm in Spain, I'll probably use the local producer Spain. So that is what I think good chefs do. Like you said, they keep reading, they keep learning as they progress in their careers. So that's what they're doing best.
Yeah, I think that's really true. All right, so I love having you on the hot seat here. This is fun for me. So for folks watching on this side of the world, especially, you're at the IICA, which is the International Institute of Culinary
Arts, yeah.
Arts. And you didn't start that. Your father did. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. So I joined about 10 years ago. And my father started it 15 years ago. He started it after an entire career in hospitality. He started it about 45 years after he worked in the hotels. See, when he started his career, he actually tells us that it was never his desire to be a great chef. He just wanted to work really hard and do really well for himself and his family. It just so happened that one day he realized that without that knowledge of food, his career would somewhere be either incomplete or probably wouldn't do the best without it. So he went on to become a chef. He was a chef for good 15 years. And when he retired, he said that, look, I have to give back to what I've got so much from. And so he started the institute as a payback to the industry. And I obviously grew up listening to all the great stories that he had to tell me when he'd come back from work. So I guess I was smitten. I was spoiled for choice. I had all the opportunities. So I went out to educate myself. I got a hotel management degree, came back, and I joined. So it's been a great journey. 10 years.
That's awesome. And so, how many students do you have there right now?
All right. So year end, we typically graduate roughly around 140 to 150 full-time students. Now, these are students who, join us one of either two times of the year. One, we have an intake in January and one in July. And these are all students who are doing a full-time program. So with the meaning of which we either have a program that specializes in culinary arts or pastry, and each program would last anything between 1 or 2 years. Then we have short-term students who do short-term courses for anything as short as, as 1 day to all the way over to 3 months. So these are what we call hobby chef courses.
Oh, nice. That's amazing. So, what in your opinion, what makes for the best culinary education? As basically the dean over there, you kind of get to set the agenda, and what do you feel like makes it the right culinary education there?
All right, so two things. The first I would say is good intent. You have to do this not as a business, but as a passion. I know it sounds so cliche, but I can't stress enough on this that when you do it with the right intent, everything else falls in. When you do it with the right intent, you collaborate with the right people. You do it with the right motive. You don't count hours or anything spent, any effort spent making it the best. That is, of course, the first. But a little bit more tangible, I would say, element would be something is which is what makes it complete, the industry connect. So for us, something, chef, what's always been absolutely paramount throughout the journey of 15 years is to make sure that the three pillars of our institute are concrete. The first is obviously the academics. You can't question that. I mean, it's that golden question that we keep asking people: what makes the difference between a cook and a chef? The chef knows why something's going in. With all due respect to cooks alike everywhere else in the world, chefs just know why it's going in. They know the science behind it. They know the reason behind it. So the theory behind cooking, the science behind cooking, the practical, of course, can't be left out without a doubt. And then last but not the least is the industry exposure. Now, our industry exposure, luckily for us, has been in two forms. We send our students out for internships, but equally excitingly, and something that, of course, you've been a very great part of, is when the industry comes to us. We have the privilege of hosting them through these kind of chats or interactions that are live in the institute, and the students learn a tremendous amount. So that sense of completeness is what makes any culinary education, I suppose, good.
Yeah, I love knowing the why behind it, because you can follow anybody can follow a recipe if it's written well. I will put that caveat in, because there are some recipes that are you have to have some imagination to fill in the blanks of what they meant. But knowing the why and knowing that this flavor that you're expecting is going to be developed by a caramelized onion, and if you don't caramelize it all the way, you're missing it. Or the little bit of chemistry and science that goes into some dishes that you may not even realize what's happening, but if you know the why behind it, I think that's I've never really thought about that in those terms. So that's really a great one. Um, so, what would you say the most important skill or kind of asset that your students leave with when they walk out the door? And I think it's important to kind of also tell folks that your students are not mostly 20-year-olds. There's a
No,
lot of
that's right.
accountants, there's engineers, there's all sorts of people who have had a career
Yes.
and really felt like they're in love with food and their passion is food. And so you don't have the same group of students that a lot of places do that are all just young, cutting their teeth in life as well as culinary. So I know a lot of them have already been very successful in some of the ones we talked to when we were there were engineers, they were accountants, they were in construction, they were doing their family business and just couldn't get away from the love of culinary. So I think that's really cool. What is it that they take away that's the linchpin?
I like to hope that they take away more than one thing. But if they could choose one thing, and we something that we constantly work hard at is giving them good attitude. A chef very well rightly advised us right at the beginning of our institute days. He said, cooking they learn for the rest of their lives. There is a wealth of knowledge out there to teach them cooking. There are tremendous chefs that will teach them cooking, but teach them good attitude, and you'll do them the best service that they can ever afford. Because I think, if I can say this on behalf of all chefs out there, you need people when they enter the industry. You need people with good attitude. That's it. Because, like you said, learning goes on till as long as you can imagine. So the fundamentals of cooking are, of course, a part of the curriculum. We try our best to make sure that they learn the classical cuisine of every aspect. And then, of course, the right attitude. Because when they enter your kitchen, they might have entered the industry looking at watching a television show, but they're entering the industry looking at you. And that's obviously not to say that's a compromise, but of course a big reality that they have to accept, that it's not just about what's on the stove, it's also about what's in the store. It's also about connecting with the right farmers, doing that hard work that goes in.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, I've talked a little bit on this COVID-19 changes and things that have affected us here. But what has happened in the culinary industry in India? I know some of the chefs I've talked to have had their livelihoods are changed for at least for the temporary, and a lot of people are staying in. And what do you see happening over in India, and where do you see that headed?
Okay, so in the short term, I think, like you rightly encapsulated, it's not very different from that part of the world to this one. Everyone's been affected. I don't think anyone's been immune from this change. Obviously, a lot of the restaurants have pretty much gone either curbside or they've gone out altogether. In the long run, I suppose the only thing that's holding us together is the fact knowing that this isn't permanent. We're reminding ourselves all the time this isn't what it's going to be like forever. And that is probably the only thing that's going to get us through it. So everyone's had to innovate, everyone's had to adapt. Definitely, everyone's had to be flexible. And there are restaurants that are doing things that they haven't done in 20 years. And they're happily accepting to do it now. I haven't heard of anyone selling farm produce yet, but I'm sure that's not far away either, where they will sell egg and milk. And I don't think it's a bad idea. I think if you can put your stamp of trust on a product as a chef or as a restaurant, consumers would probably trust it a lot more. Um, so there has been a lot of changes at our institute as well. We see a tremendous amount of changes. And the blessing for us is, I think for our students at least, is they're at a point of their lives where they can learn from what everyone else is doing in this process as a response. And I think they could not have been. I mean, I'm trying to see the glass half full right now, and they could not have been in a better position to sit in and look at how the world is responding. Because once they're out there, and God be kind if they ever have to go through anything similar to this, they can fall back on a memory of seeing what did that restaurant do when something like this happened? What did that chef do? So I think they're quite fortunate to that extent that they're seeing it from a very different perspective. And they're definitely going to learn a lot. We're learning a lot.
Yeah. Have you seen in your in your culture over there, some people leave the industry that were kind of marginally connected that are going to do something else?
Well, I think that probably happened even before this. The people have left before as well, and they'll continue to leave after. Not anyone that I know personally. I can't think of anyone who's left the industry because they obviously are fully invested. I think, Chef, you'll agree. Once you're in this, you're in it all in. You're all in. So it's very difficult to leave it voluntarily
Yeah.
or out of choices that are better otherwise, because anyone who's in it already is all in. So they are adapting. That's probably happening more than anything else.
We've seen some opportunities because there have been people who are doing it as a job, not because doing it as work, not because they
Yes.
love it, but for a paycheck. And as some of those people say, I don't want to fool with all of this. It's too complicated, and go into other things. There's just a vacuum of if you're really inspired and have hard work ethic and love what you're doing, I feel like the opportunity in the culinary industry is to just skyrocket because
You
there's
know,
so
I,
much.
I used to say about 5 years ago, and I hope I'm right, because otherwise I would have told a lot of people wrong things. I said 5 years ago, this industry is probably recession proof and all kinds of proof, because you've got to eat. You've got to eat. You're not going to stop eating. You may stop traveling a little less than you did last year, because that's a super luxury. Yes, food is going to become a super, eating out is going to become a super luxury too, but you'll still go out. You'll still have weddings, you'll still have birthdays, you'll still have celebrations. And in our country, as much as in any other country, I'm sure, food is a great celebration. It brings people together. I mean, a 5,000-year-old culinary tradition won't just end, succumb to something as this, because, as I said, this isn't permanent.
Yeah, if people stop having birthdays, we've got big troubles.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so I can only say that I really hope that people continue to get inspired, and I hope that they keep learning from what is happening. And in times to come, I'm sure we'll all come out stronger than this. We always have. There have been great speeches and great articles written about how all of mankind has grown out of this tough time, and that's what I want to say to all of our viewers today, that this time too shall pass. So that's that for that. So was that my last and final question?
That was the last one I had for you.
I did you notice I was sweating a lot or nervous?
You're wiping.
All right.
And I just looked down at your Facebook feed, and Gita Samuel says we will still have weddings, and
We
that
will
is
still have weddings, and Miss Samuel is pivotal in transforming the way weddings happen in India. She is an icon and a great inspiration to all of us. We know her personally as well, so my regards to her. Chef, I can't thank you enough. It is such an honor. I know it's a big deal, big weekend over there for you. It's the 4th of July weekend.
I've got my
What are the big?
white and blue on. I don't know if you
You've
can
got
see
the.
my.
So before we leave, tell us how the celebration's going to be any different this year, if they are going to be different.
There are, so it's been interesting that there are some towns who have been, and I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but there are some towns who didn't feel like they're, we do a lot of celebrations with fireworks and watermelon and barbecue and all of those things. And there are a lot of places are still discouraging large gatherings. Pretty much everywhere is still discouraging large gatherings. But there are still some fireworks celebrations. People are doing them where you should sit in your car and watch the fireworks, not necessarily outside mingling with other people. There will still be a lot of cold beer and other things consumed as people celebrate our independence. And I think I don't think there will be any less barbecue consumed this year than last year, I'll be honest. but I think people will probably do it in smaller groups at home with family, and people are kind of staying in the bubble of people that they have been around, and in a large part, and I think that's probably it's probably wise. But there'll be a lot more people watching fireworks from behind a windshield as opposed to on a deck with thousands of other people. So it's still a big weekend, and we're excited to get to celebrate that again.
Well, I wish you a very, very happy 4th of July weekend. And we are super excited to host you for our masterclass on Monday. So, for all of you who've tuned in, thank you so much for watching us today. This edition of Master Strokes by IICA has been super special. I almost tagged it as the US special because it's the 4th of July weekend. So, I think I'm going to leave it at that. And I want to wish all of you a great weekend ahead. Stay safe, stay home. Thank you, Chef. I look forward to speaking to you very, very soon.
Absolutely, it's been great.